The sky above the battlefield burned with fire and smoke, streaks of crimson and gold cutting through clouds thick with ash. The air smelled of metal and earth, of sweat and fear, and the distant screams of men and creatures alike made it clear that this day would be remembered in history, if anyone survived to tell it. Kale moved steadily through the chaos, his armor scratched and scorched, his breath coming in short, sharp bursts. Every sense was alert, every step calculated, every heartbeat a drum of war. Humans had never fought the alien forces like this before. Their ships, like living crystals, hovered above the battlefield, shooting bolts of light that scorched the ground. Among them, standing with an almost unnatural grace, was Queen Lysara, her armor shimmering with the colors of 1,000 stars, her presence alone bending the battlefield to her will. Kale's commander had given orders, but those felt meaningless now. His eyes were drawn magnetically to her. The queen moved with the fluidity of someone born into power and expectation, yet there was a subtle tension in her shoulders, a silent burden that even a soldier could recognize. And then the attack came. A spear of dark energy, jagged and cruel, cut through the air faster than any human could track. It was aimed directly at Lysara. Time slowed for Kale. He could see the queen's eyes widen not in fear but in the briefest flicker of surprise. The moment stretched, unbearable and vivid. Without thinking, Kale lunged. The world became instinct. He raised his shield just in time. The spear struck him squarely, energy exploding across his chest, knocking him to the ground. Pain ripped through him, sharp and consuming, yet he tasted neither fear nor regret. Only the urgent need to protect her kept him alive, kept him aware. Lysara's eyes widened in shock, her hand extending in a gesture that stopped the battle momentarily, even among the alien soldiers. Her power crackled in the air, almost humming with energy, but she did nothing. Not yet. She was studying him, this human who had thrown his life into the path of death for her sake. When Kale finally rolled to the ground, gasping, he looked up. He could see the way her face softened, not entirely, for the queen's mask of authority never fully left her. But there was a spark of something unspoken, something dangerous and tender. He wanted to speak, to assure her that he would survive, but words failed him. Instead, he reached for her gaze and held it. In that brief connection, Kale sensed the weight of her world. The lives depending on her, the expectations of 1,000 generations, the unyielding laws that ruled her people. And now, because of him, she was responsible for him. The alien court had rules, ancient and unbroken. Sacrifice for the queen was not merely an act of courage. It was a binding of life and soul. One who threw themselves into death for her owed her a life oath, an invisible chain that tied them to her for eternity. Kale did not yet know what that meant, but he felt it pressing against him even now, as if the very air recognized the debt he had incurred. Lysara descended to the ground, her steps graceful, measured, yet filled with authority. Around her, alien guards and courtiers fell silent. The queen knelt slightly, her eyes scanning Kale's battered body, and then she spoke in a voice that resonated like music and steel combined. "You are mine now," she said, not cruelly, but with a weight that made the ground seem heavier beneath them both. "By tradition, you are bound to me. Your life is no longer yours alone." He wanted to argue, to refuse, to run, but there was nowhere to run, not from her, not from the oath. His chest ached where the spear had struck, and yet he felt a strange, almost surreal calm. The human soldier who had faced death now faced something equally daunting, obligation to a queen he barely knew. "Queen Lysara," he managed, his voice rough and cracked. I didn't do it for oaths. I did it because—" his words faltered, swallowed by the enormity of the moment. Lysara tilted her head slightly, studying him as one studies a puzzle or a fragile artifact whose true value is not immediately clear. "You do not yet understand," she said softly, though the power in her voice made it impossible to ignore. "The oath is not punishment, it is destiny. And destiny cannot be undone once claimed." The queen stood, her armor gleaming under the blood-red sky, and turned toward the palace, signaling that Kale was to follow. Every soldier and alien alike watched him, some in admiration, some in fear. Kale felt the weight of their eyes like a physical burden, and yet he moved forward step by step toward an unknown fate. Inside the palace, the world changed. Walls of crystal reflected the dim light in infinite patterns, and the air was fragrant with alien flowers that shimmered with life. The corridors twisted in impossible ways, leading Kale in circles and spirals that made him doubt his senses. Here, tradition was not merely spoken, it was alive. Every stone, every tapestry, every silent statue whispered rules older than memory. Lysara walked ahead, silent but not unkind. Kale noticed how her shoulders carried the invisible weight of leadership, how her every motion was deliberate, and yet there was a loneliness in her, profound and aching. He wanted to reach out to say something, anything, to bridge the impossible gap between human and queen. But he was bound, by blood, by law, by oath, to follow her lead. Finally, they reached a chamber that seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat. The walls glimmered with soft light, casting shadows that danced like living spirits. Lysara gestured for Kale to kneel, and he did, despite the fire in his chest and the soreness of every muscle. "You will remain here," she said, her voice both command and promise. "Your body is safe. Your life is owed to me, and the law of my people will see it honored. But your mind, your heart, those are yours alone for now." To survive, to honor the oath, to navigate the intricate maze of alien law and courtly intrigue, he would need more: understanding, patience, and perhaps the willingness to trust the queen. Hours passed in silence. Kale watched her move through the chamber, noting the grace in her steps, the precision in her gestures, the way she seemed to command even the light to obey her will. Despite himself, he felt drawn to her, not in fear, not in awe alone, but in curiosity and admiration, in something that could grow into respect, maybe even something more. Finally, she spoke again, her tone softer this time. "Tomorrow you will meet my council. They will decide whether your presence here serves honor or chaos. But remember this: whatever they choose, the oath binds you still. You cannot undo it, and neither can I. We are linked now, human, by courage, by sacrifice, by law." And yet, as he lay on the crystalline floor, staring at the shifting patterns of light above him, he realized one truth: he would follow her. Not because he was forced to, but because he had chosen in that split second on the battlefield to protect her, and that choice had changed everything. The night stretched long and silent, the palace alive with whispered echoes and shifting shadows. Kale could hear the faint pulse of the world around him, the living rhythm of an alien culture that had no patience for weakness. And somewhere in the vast silence, he felt the queen watching him, as if her eyes could pierce not only his body but the hidden corners of his soul. A single thought repeated itself in his mind, stubborn and persistent: "I saved her, and now she owns me." Outside, the winds howled across the jagged cliffs surrounding the palace, carrying the scent of battle, of ash, of distant fires. Kale closed his eyes, knowing that dawn would bring not just new challenges, but a new reality. He was no longer just a soldier. He was bound by blood and oath to a queen whose world was as vast, dangerous, and beautiful as the stars themselves. And in that quiet, heavy moment, Kale realized the truth of it all. Some choices once made cannot be undone. He had saved her life, and in doing so, he had given her his own. The palace of Queen Lysara was unlike any place Kale had ever seen. Its corridors twisted and turned in ways that seemed to defy logic. Walls glimmered with a light that pulsed faintly, like the heartbeat of the building itself. Crystalline floors reflected their own images back in fragmented patterns, making it difficult for Kale to know where he ended and the palace began. He walked behind Lysara, his movements cautious, unsure of what was expected of him. The air was alive with the hum of alien magic, subtle but constant, and he could feel it brushing against his skin, tugging at his thoughts, whispering secrets he could not understand. Every step reminded him of the oath he had taken, unspoken, invisible, yet binding him tighter than any chain. Lysara moved ahead with quiet authority, her cloak trailing behind her like a river of starlight. She never looked back, but Kale could feel her presence pressing down like gravity, demanding his attention and obedience. The palace was not merely a home, it was a test. Every corridor, every room, every servant and guard existed to challenge him, to observe how he would adapt to this alien world. Finally, they entered a vast hall. Towering columns spiraled toward a ceiling too high for the human eye to reach. Holographic lights shimmered like dancing stars, and statues of past rulers stood solemnly, their eyes seeming to follow him. Here, Lysara paused, turning slowly to face him. "Here," she said, her voice carrying the weight of command, "you will meet my council. They will determine whether your presence strengthens or weakens my reign. You may speak when spoken to. You may act only when commanded. And you must understand this: failure is not simply punished. It changes the course of destiny." And yet, as he looked at the queen standing before him, he knew there was no other place he would rather be, even if it meant risking everything. The council appeared as a procession of figures, each more imposing than the last. Their forms shimmered in and out of perception, some humanoid, others alien in ways Kale could barely comprehend. Their eyes were sharp, intelligent, and judging. When they spoke, their voices layered together, a chorus of authority that pressed against Kale's chest. "Kale of the humans," Lysara began, her voice steady, "you have saved my life. That act has bound you to me by oath. How you conduct yourself from this point will determine your place in our world. Will you serve, or will you falter under our traditions?" Lysara's gaze, however, remained fixed on him, piercing and unreadable. "You speak with honesty," she said softly, "and that is rare among humans, but honesty without understanding is fragile. You will need to learn quickly." The palace was a labyrinth not only of stone and crystal, but of tradition and expectation. Guards challenged him at every turn not to harm, but to evaluate his strength, his agility, and his mind. Scholars quizzed him on alien history and law, their questions sharp and exacting. Mystics drew him into rooms of shimmering light, where visions danced before his eyes, revealing fragments of the past, the future, and possibilities that were terrifying in their scope. Through it all, Lysara watched, not always openly, but always. Sometimes Kale would catch her in a quiet moment, standing in a balcony above him, her hair glinting like metal under the crystalline lights, her expression unreadable. Other times, she would appear at the edge of his exercises, correcting his posture, refining his movements, her touch brief but precise. Every interaction left Kale aware of her presence, her power, and something deeper he could not name. He also began to notice the subtle tensions among her people. Some of the council members whispered in corners, glances flicking toward him, suspicion and curiosity mixing in their expressions. Others seemed to regard him as a challenge, a potential threat, or perhaps a test of their own loyalty to the queen. Kale realized that survival in this court required more than courage. It required patience, intelligence, and the ability to read intentions without words. One evening, after a particularly grueling set of trials, Kale wandered into one of the palace's many gardens. The air here was different, cooler, scented with alien flowers that glowed faintly in the dim light. The paths twisted like rivers of silver, and strange creatures flitted among the trees, their eyes reflecting the soft luminescence of the surroundings. It was peaceful, almost impossibly so, in contrast to the palace's constant pressures. Lysara appeared quietly beside him. Kale did not startle. He had grown used to her appearing when he least expected it. "You should rest," she said, her voice gentle, though it carried a power that made him stop in his tracks. "The council tests are not merely for your skill. They are for your mind and spirit as well. A human must learn quickly or he becomes lost." "And if I fail?" he asked. Her eyes darkened slightly and a shiver ran down his spine. "Failure has consequences," she said, "but more importantly, it changes how the world perceives you and how I perceive you. You must remember that, Kale. This is no longer only your life. It is ours, tied together by the oath you took." He wanted to ask more, to speak of the battlefield, of the moment he had shielded her, but no words felt sufficient. Finally, Lysara turned, moving gracefully back toward the palace. "Come," she said. "There is more to learn, more to endure, and the council grows impatient." Kale learned to handle alien weapons, to navigate customs he barely understood, and to interpret the subtle gestures that communicated volumes in this world. He stumbled often, corrected gently but firmly by Lysara herself. Each moment with her was electric, charged with tension that he could neither escape nor fully comprehend. One afternoon, during a sparring session, Kale found himself facing one of the Queen's elite guards. The creature moved with speed and precision he had never encountered. Kale parried and struck, sweat running down his face, muscles screaming. Every movement required him to anticipate, to adapt, to trust not only his own instincts, but the lessons Lysara had painstakingly taught him. At the end of the session, bruised and exhausted, Kale looked up to see Lysara standing quietly at the edge of the arena. Her eyes held a complexity that made his chest tighten, pride, curiosity, and something more, something he did not yet understand. "You are learning," she said softly. "Faster than I expected, but do not mistake speed for understanding. The true test is not of your strength or skill. It is of your loyalty, your mind, and your heart." He had leapt into fate on the battlefield, and now he was trapped, not in chains, but in a web of duty, expectation, and something far more dangerous: connection. That night, Kale sat alone in his chamber, the alien moonlight spilling through the crystalline windows. His thoughts drifted to the battlefield, to the moment of sacrifice, and to the queen herself. He wondered if she could see beyond the soldier to the man beneath. He wondered if he could ever truly belong here. A faint knock on the door broke his reverie. Lysara entered without waiting for an invitation, her presence filling the room. She moved to stand by the window, looking out over the palace grounds, her posture relaxed yet commanding. "You are restless," she observed, not as a question but as a statement. Kale swallowed, unsure how to respond. I suppose I am," he admitted. "There is so much to learn, so much I do not understand." "You cannot force the world to reveal its secrets. You must wait, watch, listen, and sometimes trust." The queen stepped closer, and for a brief moment, Kale felt the pulse of her presence like a living thing brushing against his own. Then she spoke, her voice low and commanding. "They echo through the palace, through the court, and through my life." And somewhere deep in his chest, beneath exhaustion and uncertainty, a spark of something new began to grow. Respect for the queen, curiosity about her world, and the first stirrings of something he dared not name. The palace had grown even more intimidating to Kale over the weeks, not because of its size or alien architecture, but because of the weight of its expectations. Every corridor, every flickering light, every whispering shadow reminded him that he was no longer a simple soldier. He was bound by the oath he had taken, a human tethered to a queen, a world apart from his own. Despite the endless tests and the ever-watchful eyes of the council, Kale found moments of quiet, stolen minutes when he could breathe, when the alien beauty of Lysara's world could be appreciated without judgment. One such moment came in the palace gardens, where alien flora glimmered faintly under twin moons. The air was cool and fragrant, carrying a faint hum of magic that seemed almost sentient. Lysara found him there, standing among flowers that shifted in color with the faintest movement. She did not announce herself, simply stepping into the soft glow, her presence immediately filling the space with authority and grace. "You seek solace," she said, her voice low and almost a whisper, though it resonated through the garden. Kale swallowed. I do not mean to intrude," he said, though he knew he was not intruding. The oath gave him no choice but to exist in her world under her gaze at all times. "I just need a moment to think." "Thinking is necessary," she said finally. "But reflection without understanding is dangerous. You must learn to see not only the world around you, but the currents beneath it." "But it is so different from what I know." The queen, untouchable and feared, was acknowledging him, not as a soldier, not as a tool, but as a person. Yet with that acknowledgement came a pressure he could not escape. Every word, every glance, every action mattered now. Over the next few days, the council devised a new set of trials, unlike any Kale had faced before. This time, the test was not of strength or skill, but of perception and loyalty. He would be placed in situations designed to force him to make impossible choices, to weigh the needs of the queen against his own instincts and the remnants of his humanity. During one trial, Kale was led to a chamber that seemed alive with light. The walls shimmered, shifting like liquid, and strange symbols floated midair, glowing faintly. Within the chamber were illusions, scenes from Kale's life, memories of his past battles, faces of the people he had fought alongside, and visions of Lysara in moments of danger. "You must choose," a voice intoned, though no figure was present. "Every choice shapes your bond. Every hesitation weakens it. Decide wisely." Hours seemed to pass as he moved through the visions. He faltered, stumbled, and hesitated, but always remembered the oath, the invisible bond that tied his fate to hers. At last, the chamber's light dimmed, and Lysara appeared, her presence steadying him. "You have done well," she said quietly. "But remember, Kale, loyalty is not blind, it is understanding. Strength without comprehension is meaningless." He wandered the palace halls, guided by instinct and a strange pull he did not fully understand. Eventually, he found himself on a balcony overlooking the alien city below. Towers glimmered like living crystals, streets alive with motion and light, a civilization so alien it made him dizzy with awe. And then he felt her presence before he saw her. Lysara stepped onto the balcony quietly, her gaze fixed on the city lights. For a moment they stood together in silence, two figures caught between duty and desire, human and alien, soldier and queen. "Do you ever regret it?" Kale asked, finally breaking the silence. "The oath, I mean, saving me. My life is shaped by law and expectation. Personal feelings are secondary. But sometimes, Kale, even a queen wonders what might have been if the rules did not bind her." The oath bound him to her, but it did not erase the distance between human and alien, soldier and ruler. "Then we are both trapped," he said softly. "You by your people, me by my choice to protect you. And sometimes, the most dangerous path is the one we walk together." Something stirred in the depths of the palace, an energy older than memory, drawn to the human bound by oath. "We are not alone," Lysara said, her voice a mixture of command and warning. "Something has sensed the bond, something curious and perhaps dangerous." He felt fear, yes, but also a strange exhilaration. This was not merely a test of skill or loyalty. It was a test of their bond, of the very connection that had been forged in blood and sacrifice on the battlefield. The next morning, the council gathered again. Their faces were unreadable, their bodies shimmering faintly in the light. They spoke in a chorus, voices layered and commanding. "The bond you share," they said, "is unusual, unpredictable. It is both strength and vulnerability. You must prove that it can be controlled, that it does not endanger the queen or her realm." One misstep could cost him not just favor, but his place in this world. Throughout the day, Kale faced challenges that tested his perception, his decision-making, and his understanding of alien tradition. He found himself thinking constantly of Lysara, her guidance, her presence, her strength. Each test drew him closer to her, and yet reminded him of the chasm that still existed between them. By evening, Kale's mind was weary. He returned to the gardens, seeking the quiet he had found before. Lysara was already there, standing among the glowing flowers as if she had anticipated his arrival. "You are learning," she said simply. "Faster than I expected, but learning is only the first step. Understanding, Kale, that is the path that will truly bind you to this world, and to me." It was becoming a connection of hearts and minds, of trust and understanding, and perhaps one day of something deeper. Yet even as the moment held, a shadow passed through the garden, a ripple in the air, subtle but unmistakable. Kale felt it in his chest, a chill that spoke of forces beyond his comprehension. Lysara noticed it too, her expression tightening with concern. "Stay close," she whispered. "The palace is awake tonight, and it senses us." And in that quiet, alien garden under the twin moons, Kale understood that the oath he had taken was no longer merely a promise of loyalty. It was a key, a signal, and perhaps a warning. Their bond had consequences, and the shadows were already beginning to stir the palace, once a place of quiet lessons and endless trials, now felt alive with a restless energy. Shadows seemed deeper, walls whispered in strange tones, and the light from the twin moons flickered as if uncertain. Kale sensed it before he saw it, a movement at the edge of perception, subtle yet undeniably there. Something had awakened, drawn to the bond between him and Queen Lysara. The day began with the council summoning them to a chamber unlike any Kale had entered before. The walls shimmered with silver light and strange symbols floated in midair, pulsing like a heartbeat. Lysara's expression was tense, her usual calm replaced by a sharp focus Kale had never seen. "This is no ordinary trial," she said quietly, her voice carrying both command and warning. "What has awakened is drawn to your life force, Kale. It is neither human nor fully alien. It will test us, our bond, our strength, and our resolve. We must face it together, or it will consume everything we hold dear." It moved along the edges of the chamber like smoke, always just out of reach, testing, watching. Lysara turned to him. "Remember the oath, Kale. We are bound. We face this together. Trust me and trust yourself." It was like facing a mirror, yet distorted, a reflection of fear, doubt, and instinct. Kale felt it probing his mind, whispering insecurities he did not know he held. The first strike came from Lysara. She moved with precision and power, her weapon glowing with alien energy. The shadow recoiled, but not fully. It was patient, learning, adapting. Kale moved instinctively to her side, raising his shield to protect her as it lashed toward them. The clash was violent yet controlled. Light against shadow, human courage against alien might, queen against entity. Kale felt the bond between them strengthen with every shared movement. Each time they acted in unison, the shadow faltered, revealing that their connection was more than duty. It was coordination, trust, and something deeper. Hours, or perhaps minutes, passed in a blur of combat, strategy, and instinct. Kale found himself relying on Lysara's guidance, yet also noticing subtle shifts in her energy, hints of emotion she rarely revealed. He felt respect, admiration, and something he could not name stirring inside him. At one point, the shadow forced them into a narrow corridor. Its form expanded, filling the space with darkness, pressing on them as if it could bend reality itself. Kale's shield barely held, and he stumbled. Lysara's hand shot out, steadying him, her grip firm and commanding. "You are stronger than you realize," she said, her voice calm amid chaos. "Do not doubt yourself, do not doubt us." Kale realized that the shadow was not merely attacking them. It was testing the bond itself, probing for cracks, searching for hesitation or mistrust. Finally, they reached the heart of the chamber, a space where the walls themselves seemed to pulse with life. Lysara raised her weapon, and Kale followed suit, their combined presence radiating power that resonated through the entire room. The shadow surged one last time, a wave of darkness that threatened to overwhelm them. Kale stepped forward, drawing on courage he did not know he had. "We are bound," he shouted. "We face this together." Kale followed, directing the force of his own presence into the strike. The chamber erupted in light and sound, shadows twisting and screaming before dissolving into nothingness. When the light faded, Kale and Lysara stood together, breathing heavily, their bodies exhausted but intact. The shadow was gone, or at least banished for now. The chamber felt lighter, the oppressive energy dissipated. Kale realized with a mixture of relief and awe that their bond had endured the test. But the victory came at a cost. Kale felt a strange pull in his chest, a subtle weakening as if the shadow had taken something from him, energy, focus, or a fragment of his life force. Lysara noticed it immediately, her expression tightening with concern. "You are affected," she said quietly, examining him with careful eyes. "The shadow fed on the bond. We must restore your strength before it returns." He was no longer simply a soldier. He was a part of something larger, something that required him to be more than he had ever imagined. Over the following days, Kale recovered physically, but he felt the lingering presence of the shadow in his mind, a subtle echo of its probing energy. Lysara worked closely with him, teaching him how to sense and control the flow of energy within himself, how to strengthen the bond between them to prevent further attacks. Each session was exhausting, yet it brought them closer. Trust deepened, understanding grew, and the unspoken connection between them became undeniable. One evening, after another long session, they walked together in the palace gardens. The air was cool, the alien flowers glowing softly, and the twin moons reflected in the pools of water. Kale spoke first, breaking the silence that had grown comfortable between them. "Lysara, I feel it," he said quietly. "The shadow, it took something from me, but it also showed me us, how connected we are. How much I rely on you." For the first time, he realized that their bond was no longer solely about duty or survival. It was about understanding, about trust, about two beings from entirely different worlds finding strength in each other. Yet even as the moment held, a subtle tension lingered. The shadow had been only the first test. The palace whispered of other forces, other entities drawn to the bond they shared. Kale knew that their journey was far from over. The next morning, the council convened again. Their forms shimmered, layered, and shifting, eyes piercing into Kale as if seeking the smallest sign of weakness. "The bond has proven resilient," they said, "but resilience alone is not enough. You must now demonstrate control, foresight, and judgment in the face of external threat." It was a force recognized by the palace, by the council, and by the powers that lingered beyond perception. Every decision, every action, every hesitation could have consequences far beyond their own lives. That evening, as the palace descended into silence, Kale found himself standing on a balcony overlooking the city. He could feel the lingering presence of the shadow, subtle but unmistakable, a reminder that danger was never truly gone. Lysara joined him, and for a long moment they simply stood together, silent yet connected. "You saved me," she said softly. "But you also reminded me of something I had almost forgotten. That strength comes not from solitude, but from connection, from trust. From choosing to stand together, even when the odds seem impossible." And somewhere deep within the labyrinth of crystal and shadow, a subtle stirring moved through the corridors, hinting that the trials were far from over. Kale and Lysara stood together, ready to face whatever came next, bound by oath, by courage, and by the unspoken connection that had begun to define them both. The palace was restless that night. The twin moons cast pale silver light across the crystalline walls, shadows stretching and twisting like living creatures. Kale could feel the tension in the air, the whisper of the palace itself, warning, anticipating. Every corridor hummed with energy, every symbol pulsed with life. He and Lysara stood in the council chamber, facing the figures who had guided, tested, and judged him since his arrival. The council's forms shimmered with layered authority, their eyes piercing through him, through Lysara, through the invisible bond that had grown between them. "The bond has grown stronger than expected," the tallest counselor said, voice layered and commanding. "But strength alone does not suffice. Forces beyond comprehension sense this connection. The palace is alive, and the shadow you faced before is only a part of what threatens us. Whatever comes, we do not face it as queen and soldier, but as allies. Bound by oath, yes, but also by choice. The chamber's light shifted suddenly, and a chilling wind swept through, carrying the faint hum of alien energy. From the shadows emerged the entity, a darker, more powerful form of the shadow that had attacked them before. It moved with purpose, drawn to the bond that now radiated between them like a living force. The council stepped back, observing, silent, yet every eye fixed on Kale and Lysara. The shadow's presence pressed against them, probing, testing, sensing hesitation or fear. Kale drew his weapon instinctively, the metal hilt cool in his hand. Lysara raised hers, energy flaring from the alien blade like liquid light. Together they faced the darkness, their bond a tether of courage and understanding. The shadow struck first, a wave of darkness that seemed to fold reality itself. Kale moved instinctively, shielding Lysara as he had sworn to do on the battlefield. But this time it was not just protection. Every movement, every strike, every thought had to be in perfect harmony with her. Hesitation would be fatal. Hours passed, or maybe minutes, the chamber a blur of light, shadow, and energy. Kale felt the bond between them grow with every shared move. Where one hesitated, the other compensated. Where one struck, the other reinforced. Together they became more than soldier and queen. They became a single force, a living testament to the oath and the connection it had forged. At one point, the shadow surged with such intensity that Kale was thrown backward, hitting the crystalline floor with a heavy thud. Pain shot through his body, but he forced himself to rise. He met Lysara's gaze, and in that instant words were unnecessary. They were synchronized, minds aligned, hearts echoing the unspoken promise. Together they would endure. Drawing on the bond that had grown through trials, lessons, and shared moments of vulnerability, Kale and Lysara unleashed a coordinated attack. Energy and courage flowed through them, connecting their movements, amplifying their strength. The shadow screamed, recoiling from the intensity of their unity, before dissipating into a ripple of light and silence. When the chamber finally stilled, Kale and Lysara were standing together, breathing heavily, their bodies exhausted but intact. The shadow was gone, or at least banished for now. The council regarded them in silence, and for the first time, Kale saw a flicker of approval in their eyes. "You have endured," the council said finally. "Not by strength alone, but by unity, understanding, and trust. The oath is honored, and the bond it created has proven stronger than any shadow. I am proud of you." It was a rare and fragile thing, and Kale felt it like sunlight after a storm. In the days that followed, the palace slowly returned to a state of quiet. The council observed him with renewed respect, acknowledging the strength of the bond that had been forged in the face of true danger. Kale continued to train, to learn, and to navigate the complex world of alien customs, but now with a sense of belonging, a certainty that he had never known before. He and Lysara spent hours together, walking through the glowing gardens, discussing strategy, history, and moments from the battlefield that had first bound them. They shared quiet conversations under twin moons, learning to trust not only their skills but their instincts and hearts. One evening, as they stood on a balcony overlooking the city, Kale spoke first. "I never thought, after the battle, after everything, that I could find something like this, a place where I belong. Not just as a soldier, but as part of something larger. And I will continue to stand by you whatever comes, oath or not, because I believe in what we share. You have earned your place here." In the weeks that followed, Kale and Lysara worked together to strengthen the palace's defenses, train the next generation of warriors, and prepare for any threat that might challenge their world. The shadow had been only the first test. Others might come. But now they faced the future not as queen and soldier, but as allies, equals, and partners in a bond that transcended duty. One evening, as Kale walked through the quiet palace corridors, he heard the soft hum of alien energy, the same sound that had once signaled danger, now a comforting presence. He found Lysara in the gardens, standing among the glowing flora, the twin moons reflecting in her hair. She looked at him, and in that moment words were unnecessary. They had faced the shadow, endured trials, and emerged stronger. The oath had been fulfilled, but more importantly, the bond had become something living, something enduring, something neither could deny. Kale took a step closer. "Whatever comes next," he said softly, "we face it together." The palace, once restless and alive with unseen forces, now seemed calm, as if acknowledging that the human soldier and the alien queen had proven themselves. The twin moons shone overhead, silver light cascading over the crystalline walls, casting long shadows that whispered of challenges yet to come, but none that could break the bond they had forged. For Kale, the journey had begun with a single act of courage, taking the blow meant for a queen. That act had demanded an oath, bound him to an alien world, and led him through trials of shadow, trust, and understanding. But in the end, it had given him more than survival. It had given him connection, purpose, and a place in a world far beyond what he had ever imagined. Lysara reached for his hand, a simple gesture, yet one that spoke of trust, respect, and shared courage. Kale took it, feeling the warmth of the bond, the unspoken promise, and the certainty that they were no longer two beings bound by chance. They were partners, allies, and something far deeper than either had expected. The palace was quiet, the twin moons casting silver light over the gardens. Somewhere in the shadows of the labyrinthine halls, the faint echoes of ancient forces lingered, but they were powerless against what had been forged in courage, sacrifice, and unity. Kale and Lysara stood together, hand in hand, facing the future, whatever it might bring, with unwavering resolve. Their story had begun with an act of protection. It had grown through trials of shadow and trust. And now it would continue, bound by the oath, strengthened by courage, and illuminated by a connection that neither time, shadow, nor distance could sever.